This video is sponsored by DistroKid. In my experience, mixing can be reduced to one simple step: identifying and solving problems. But completing this isn't always so easy. In fact, there's a quote about us audio engineers out there, and that is, we solve problems you didn't know you have in ways you can't understand. And a big disconnect between a professional mixer and an amateur one is their ability to make good decisions that turns a crappy sounding mix into one that competes with professional mixes from your favorite artists. But how exactly do we make good decisions in a mix? Well, through a lot of trial and error built upon experience, coupled with an arsenal of mixing strategies and techniques, and last but certainly not least, high quality tools that guide us to making the best decisions possible. And that last part is what I want to talk about in today's video. I'm going to show you 5 essential plugins that will transform the way that you approach your mixes, helping you make smarter, faster, and most importantly, better decisions every time. Trust me when I say this, missing out on these plugins could be the reason why you're missing out on that professional sound that competes, and I'm going to show you what they are and how I use them in my own mixes. And make sure you watch this video all the way till the end, because I saved my favorite and arguably the most helpful tool for last, especially if you're someone who is mixing music that's going to end up on streaming platforms, which these days should be pretty much all of you watching. And just for transparency, this video is not sponsored by any of the plugin brands that are being featured in this video. I genuinely use these tools, and I think they're going to make a big difference in your mixes just as they've done for me. And while the plugins I'm about to show you can make the mixing process easier, the sponsor of today's video, DistroKid, can make distributing your music and creating content around it even more effortless. They make getting your music on a stores a breeze with their simple interface, and they pass on 100% of the earnings generated from your music directly to you. DistroKid also gives you access to helpful tools for content creation and marketing your release, including hyperfollow landing pages, the Visi video generator, and much more. Other distributors make you pay every time you upload something, or they keep a percentage of your earnings, which ultimately ends up costing you more. With DistroKid, you pay a low annual subscription fee that lets you distribute unlimited music for the year, making it much more convenient and less expensive than the other guys. Millions of artists, myself included, love using DistroKid, and I'm sure you will too. You can save 7% off your first year by hitting the link down in the description below. Thank you to DistroKid for sponsoring this video, and now, back to the content. Now, the first plugin that I want to show you is Gain Match from Let It Mix. One of the biggest challenges in mixing is the louder is better bias. This is a psychological phenomenon where we perceive louder sounds as better, clearer, or higher quality, even when the actual content hasn't improved. This bias can lead to poor decision making during mixing and mastering, resulting in the prioritization of loudness over dynamics and balance, and leading to a worse sounding final product. And that's why I rely on Gain Match to eliminate this bias altogether. Gain Match is an auto-leveling tool that adjusts the volume of your signal after processing to match the original level. This lets you hear your sound at the same level before and after processing. That way, you can make more accurate decisions without being influenced by loudness changes. So for this example, let's focus on the horns I have in this track. I've beefed them up a little bit with some additive EQ and some saturation. Let me play the before and after so you could hear the difference. Now, while it definitely sounds fuller and beefier, you can also tell that it's definitely louder at the same time, and this is a good situation to use Gain Match in. What I can do is I can put an instance at the start of my chain before the processing, and I'm going to make sure that it's set to the before mode. Afterwards, I'm going to drag and copy an instance after my processing and make sure that it's set to after. Now, when I play the track, I'll be able to apply gain compensation, which will essentially match the level of the track before the processing. This is ultimately going to remove that loudness bias and allow me to figure out if the processing I've applied is actually good and enhancing the sound, or if it's simply making it louder and making me think that it's better because of that fact. I can also press this button here, which is going to allow me to hear the signal before and after, and that'll be a good way to compare. And if I really want, I can even enable the auto adjust gain mode, which will dynamically adjust the volume in real time and give me a bit more of an accurate representation of the volume changes. Let's try it and see what happens. the difference between the before and after is now a lot more subtle since the volumes are now roughly matched. Now, while I'm using it on an individual track here, gain match can be great at mastering as well. You can apply it at the beginning of your mastering chain and again at the end to ensure every step of your process is actually improving the sound rather than being tricked by the loudness alone. Honestly, this is a simple yet powerful tool that can really make the difference when it comes to making good decisions in your mixing process. And best of all, it only costs $19, so definitely don't sleep on this plugin if you haven't used it yet. Now, this leads us to the second plugin I want to talk about, which is Plugin Doctor from DDMF. Plugin Doctor essentially helps you really understand what your plugin is doing to your audio. The truth is, sometimes just putting a plugin onto your material can drastically change it, even if you aren't necessarily adjusting the parameters. For example, I always found that putting an instance of Universal Audio's Pultec Legacy always made my track sound better, even if I don't add any gain to anything. Well, I've come to realize after loading this plugin into the linear analysis mode of Plugin Doctor, you can see that even when I'm not doing anything with the plugin, it's almost instantly adding a bunch of gain to the signal. You got 0 dB here, 2.5 here. You can see that it's adding about almost 1.5 dB of volume instantly, as well as a few specific boosts. And again, this is without me doing anything. And as we just discussed in the previous point, even this small increase is instantly going to give me that loudness is better bias. And this is something I wouldn't have necessarily figured out without having access to this plugin. Now that I know this, when using that Pultec in the future, if I choose to, I'm going to need to make sure that I do some sort of gain compensation or use a plugin like Gain Match to make sure that the Pultec is actually doing some great work rather than just making something louder and therefore making me think it sounds better. Let's take a look at another plugin that I like to use, this time being the Brainworks BX Townhouse Bus Compressor, and this is one that I use in almost every mix. If I switch over to the Dynamics view mode, we can actually see the compression curve that's going to be taking place with this plugin. As I go in and adjust specific variables, you're going to be able to see that the dynamics curve changes. For example, if I make it 4:1, if I speed up the attack, if I slow down the release, and if I increase the threshold, you can now see that the curve has changed from where it initially was. This gives me a better idea of how the compressor is affecting my signal and can better inform my choices moving forward. Now, these of course are just two analysis modes that you can find within this plugin, but I really do find that I'm relying on the linear analysis and the dynamic section the most. But the point is, sometimes your plugins can deceive you, making it hard to trust them, and a plugin like this, Plugin Doctor, can really help you understand exactly what's going on under the hood. And if you're looking for a simple free option that's very much EQ focused, you could check out this other plugin called EQ Curve Analyzer, which I'll link to down below. Now, to be fair, it's not as deep as Plugin Doctor, but it could still be helpful, especially if you don't have the budget for a new plugin like this. Now, the third plugin that I want to show you is Isotope's Tonal Balance Control 2. This plugin allows you to clearly view the tonal balance of your audio and compare it against target curves from other popular music genres. In other words, it lets you compare the EQ balance of your track to others within your defined genre. Now, me personally, I like to use Tonal Balance Control 2 towards the end of my process just to make sure that my overall levels and balance are competitive. So, for example, I could put it on my master after my mastering chain. I can then choose the genre. In this case, I'm going to do bass heavy because this is more of an Afro fusion track. Or you can load your own reference in if you prefer that instead. And then I'm going to play the track and ultimately make sure that these lines are ideally falling within the defined areas here. This will ultimately let us know that our track is competitive, at least for this curve. And if it isn't, if it's falling outside of this, then I know to go back into my track and make some adjustments to ultimately get them to hit that target. I'd also pay attention to my crest factor here, with this being dynamic and this being compressed, and try to ultimately have this sitting somewhere in the middle. So let's play this track and see where it's sitting so far. And overall, you can see that I'm roughly in the ballpark. The bass is getting a little bit high at times, and that is telling me that maybe I need to do something about it. But if I feel like I like it and it's good, I know that it's roughly going to compete. And again, that crest factor is sitting roughly where I want it in the middle, which is a good thing. Now, since we're on the topic of referencing specifically, let's talk about the fourth plugin on this list, which is the 80 PTR Metric AB from Plugin Alliance. This is arguably the best referencing plugin available, allowing you to compare your in-progress mix to up to 16 other audio files with the simple click click of the A/B button. Metric A/B provides detailed insights on how your mix compares to your reference tracks, including frequency spectrum analysis, phase correlation, stereo imaging, dynamics, and overall loudness with peak, RMS, and LUFS metering. You can sync reference tracks with your DAW, set cue markers to compare specific sections, and take advantage of various graph and filter options to solo different frequency ranges with precision. One of my favorite features is the ability to solo and monitor the mid and side channels. This helps me understand how my mix will translate into different listening environments and check its overall mono compatibility. Now, just like tonal balance control 2, I typically use metric A/B towards the end of my process, once I have my first mix roughly 80 to 90% there, to compare it to other industry tracks or even previous versions of the track that I'm working on. This ultimately helps ensure that my mix sounds polished and competitive. Honestly, it's an essential tool, even if just for metering alone. Now, for a bit of a simpler alternative, you could check out Reference from Mastering the Mix. It also allows you to reference another track, loop sections, and even gain match the two to avoid volume bias, as I mentioned earlier. And while it doesn't offer the extra metering, detailed analysis, or the mid-side solo functions of metric A/B, Reference is still a great option that can easily fit into your workflow. Honestly, either plugin should get the job done. As long as you have at least one of them in your arsenal, you should be good. So I've saved the best for last, and this is a plugin that I've relied on for quite some time now to understand how my mixes and masters are going to translate onto streaming platforms. And that would be ADPTR Streamliner. Streamliner has some of the same benefits as the previous metric A/B plugin I just showed you, being that you can see some key loudness readings such as LUFS, peak level, and dynamics readings of your material, and even reference your track against another. But arguably one of the best parts about this plugin is the ability to audition what your mix sounds like in real time. I can literally flip it into a specific mode like Spotify, hear what it sounds like, and then revisit my mix in real time while it's playing back at that level. For example, we can see the loudness target for each of these platforms on the right side of the interface here, with Spotify normalizing audio to -14, Apple to -16, Tidal to -14, and so on. That means when I decide to distribute this master on a streaming platforms, it's ultimately going to normalize the audio on Spotify to -14 LUFS, regardless of whatever level I'm actually achieving within the session itself. In other words, it won't play back the level that I'm achieving through my mastering process, but rather a level that is consistent with other songs on their platform. The goal of this for streaming services is to ensure a smooth and consistent experience for listeners that doesn't require constant volume adjustment on their end. While it may be tempting and even logical to mix your music to these levels of like -14, for example, it probably won't be good for other situations that your master is going to be played in that doesn't normalize the audio, such as at a concert, or at a bar, or a club, or on the radio, or on television. These situations don't normalize audio like these streaming services do, and if I turn in something at -14 LUFS, for example, it's probably going to sound much quieter than everything else that's being played, since a lot of engineers are still mastering music to be at least -9 or -8 LUFS. Some a little bit higher and some a little bit lower, but nonetheless, nobody is really mastering their music to be that quiet. However, I do want to have an idea of how my master is going to translate onto these platforms when it is played back at this lower level. And that's where the ADPTR Streamliner comes into play. So if I play this track, let's see exactly what level I'm hitting right now.
Baby smooth like basmati. She didn't want ride motor Maserati, yeah. She didn't want sip sake. She didn't want soft life, no paparazzi, yeah. Baby smooth like basmati. She didn't want ride motor in a Maserati, yeah. She didn't want sip sake. She didn't want soft life, no paparazzi.
So in my case here, my master is hitting somewhere around -9 or -10 LUFS. With that in mind, I can press the match button, and now when I play it again, it's actually going to play the track back at Spotify's volume because I have that selected. So it's going to play it back at -14 LUFS. Let's check that out.
Baby smooth like basmati. She didn't want ride motor Maserati, yeah. She didn't want sip sake. She didn't want soft life, no paparazzi, yeah. Baby smooth like basmati. She didn't want ride motor in a Maserati, yeah. She didn't want sip sake. She didn't want soft life, no paparazzi.
Now, obviously, I disabled it at the end so you could really hear that volume difference, but essentially it's actually showing me under the normalization tab here that it's essentially reducing the level of my track by about -2.7 in order to get to that -14 LUFS target. Now, I can, of course, repeat this process for the other platforms that are listed if I want, but really what I'm trying to do is just get an understanding of how this is going to sound when it hits the streaming platform, and if there's anything that really stands out, I can actually keep match on, go into my mix, and then make some adjustments to ensure that the translation information is better. So for example, I might notice that the vocal suddenly becomes buried when I do this. Or maybe I notice that the bass or the drums become buried. Or maybe the opposite. Maybe something becomes a little bit more overemphasized. I can ultimately use this vantage point to understand exactly what's going to happen and then make adjustments to my mix in real time. And that'll ultimately help my track translate better onto these platforms. Now I can take it a step further and preview the track through the codec that is associated with each individual streaming service. And if I'm really concerned about what types of artifacts are being produced in this process, I can press the artifacts button and it's going to actually solo and audition what those artifacts sound like so. Super ugly, but we can obviously just, again, anticipate what's going to happen through this encoding process and normalization process. Now, I was searching for a plugin like this for a long time, and the truth is I haven't really found anything else that comes close to this, at least not yet. There are some alternatives out there, such as free websites where you can upload your audio to and then preview what the track sounds like when it hits a specific streaming platform or through a specific codec, but honestly, they're a lot more clunky and don't really give you that same level of real-time feedback as this one, because this one's actually in your DAW and you're able to mix into it in real time and preview what happens. You can even make decisions and hear the consequence of those decisions once it hits streaming platforms, whereas these alternatives, you typically have to bounce your track and you got to do a lot of back and forth. So if there is one plugin on this list today that I would rush out and buy, it's absolutely this one. I use it on every single mix and I have since I purchased it back in 2021. Now, these are 5 plugins that I wanted to highlight in this video, and I know that they help me personally make more effective mixing decisions in my own sessions, but there's certainly other tools out there that I haven't included, and I'd love to hear from you guys specifically. Drop in the comments below, what is a plugin that I didn't talk about that helps you make more effective mixing decisions, and how does it help you specifically? I love getting put on new plugins from you guys, so I hope you can do that for me. And if you want, you can watch another video that I did right here, which is all about another plugin that helps you make faster and easier mixing decisions and can be a great replacement for EQ specifically. I'll also leave a playlist on the other side of the screen with some of my best vocal mixing tutorials. If you got value out of this video, please smash that like button blue. And of course, subscribe to the channel if you want to see some more mixing content like this in the future. I appreciate y'all for watching. I look forward to helping y'all again soon. Peace.
5